Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. I am your host for the week, Dennis Cheney, and this week we have part 3, the finale of our Zacharia Sitchen Genesis Revisited series. I'm joined as always by Patrick Ryan. How are you doing, Patrick?
I'm good, man. Oh, before I got to tell you before I forget about it. So on our bonus episode, our Friday episode last week, you talked about some really crazy stuff
Yeah.
and introduced me to binomial beats. Have you tried this yet?
Binaural beats.
Binaural? Sorry.
No, I have not tried it because I keep forgetting my headphones at work. And for those of you saying, "Hey, you're wearing headphones right now," it's because I have an iPhone, so I need those weird headphones. Have you tried it?
I did.
Oh, please tell.
I did. Okay, so I had kind of a weird. Okay, so I put it in. I got some like big headphones or whatever, kind of like what you're wearing, but like some like earmuffs basically. I got some Beats. So put those on, laid down on like this like acupuncture like mat thing that I have.
I thought about buying one of those mats just to try this.
It's very painful, but also it feels like it helps. So it's kind of a mixed bag. Like the first 10 minutes or so is absolute torture, but if you can make it through that, they're actually very delightful.
So I had sent you some links of binaural
Yes.
beats. Did you use any of the ones I sent you?
Did. I used
Okay, because those were all those were all out of body experience ones.
Okay, well then that may explain some of what started happening then.
What? Oh, you
Okay,
gotta go into detail.
I'm going to. I will say, like, I think you mentioned when you were talking about this, like, this is like a starting point for like remote viewing. Is that correct? Do I remember that right?
It's a method that you can use.
Okay,
One of the applications is remote viewing.
That totally makes sense. Okay, so got laid down. I'm laying there. I'm probably 5 minutes into this thing, and I'm just like closing my eyes, laying on the floor, just trying to relax as much as possible. Like, got my arms spread out, just trying to relax completely and just let whatever's gonna like clear my mind, let whatever's gonna happen happen. So the first weird thing and I guess it isn't super weird. Like I finally got relaxed after like 5 or 10 minutes. Like the acupuncture thing like stopped hurting and was now becoming comfortable. The first thing I remember is I had my eyes closed and I started seeing a blue light in front of my eyes.
Ooh.
So I started seeing this flashing blue light. So I'm like, all right, that's kind of cool. I've done like sensory deprivation chambers before, though, so that isn't that weird. Like I've had stuff like that happen just because your brain doesn't have anything else to do. It's like colors.
That's kind of that's my trick at night to fall asleep is to try to watch the lights that you produce on the back of your eye.
I usually don't. Like that's not. Anyway. Okay, so that happened. And I'm like, all right, we're getting in like probably another 5 minutes or so, just kind of relaxing. And the beat had been pretty constant. Like it's changed tones a little bit, and there's a little bit of pitch change happening, but it's not really music in any way. I, for about 10 seconds, heard a weird techno beat in my left ear that I am 99% positive was not in that because it did not happen again, did not happen in the other ear. Just like its own weird thing, but it felt like it was coming from the left side. So that happened.
I listen to those not in the context of trying to use them, and I'm pretty sure there's not a random techno beat.
And like I said, this did not happen. I probably did this for 45 minutes to an hour.
Wow.
I think. I'm not sure how far I got. Well, I think when I looked at the video, I think it was pretty close to an hour. So at this point, we're like 20 minutes in. I don't remember which happened first. I heard voices at a couple different points though.
Whoa.
And like at one point heard like an audible woman's voice. I couldn't really decipher what was being said. It more freaked me out and it would keep on making me open my eyes and look around the room. Like it felt like somebody was there.
Yeah, how did she sound?
Like I said, fair voice. If I had to guess an age, probably 30, probably about our age. Like not old, not young.
Oh, weird, man. It's like you got a little taste. Okay, what else happened?
Heard a male voice a few minutes. And intermittent during this. Like at one point, my legs started shaking to where it felt like somebody was walking on my floor very heavily. or like
Whoa.
somebody was on the outside of my house, like pushing or something like that was, but just on my legs. It was just a weird I don't know how to describe it other than it sounded like somebody like stomping really quickly or something, like vibration happening,
Whoa.
like the floor is moving below me. And
Dude,
then
you
just
were.
very I kept hearing like there was somebody opening doors or something. Like I kept on opening my eyes thinking somebody had like broken my house.
Oh man, dude, it's like you're getting a little I gotta try this. I gotta
It
try
was
this.
it was I'm definitely doing it again. And yeah, when you the little bit you'd said about how this is going to be like an intro into remote viewing, as soon as I did it and like started just those little bits, I was like, oh yeah, this totally makes sense how you could end like. There's definitely, I think there is something to this. I don't want to say definitely yet because I'm still very much baby stages on playing with this, but pretty good first results for having no idea what I'm doing.
That makes me really happy that one of us tried it within the week and that you had some interesting experience. I've got to try that and
I don't know
report
that I
back.
call it positive. Like it was fun, but it was also, like I said, kind of freaky.
Yeah.
Like I
Dude,
couldn't fully get into it because I did not feel completely like I did not 100% believe that there wasn't actually somebody in my house.
oh boy. So like instead of you fully coming out, maybe you were experiencing things that happened at different times just since through your senses, you know what I mean? Like the voice
Yeah.
of someone who used to live there or some random day where somebody shut a door. The leg vibration thing sounds very. When I was looking into that, Mr. Monroe, who came up with this, um, he described similar like bodily feelings to
And like
what
I
you.
felt it through like the rest of my body at different points. At one point though the legs were very constant and went on for several minutes. To
Oh,
where I
that's
could
very
actually notice
interesting.
like it is happening waist down. And that's the part that wasn't the only thing I could figure is that was a part of me that wasn't on the acupuncture mat. So it didn't have that stimulus happening like my back did.
Well, those waves, those sound waves. Yeah, wow, that's really cool, man. Okay, we need to keep for those of you who have no idea what we're talking about. Go back and listen to our I think it's the Gateway
It's
Experience.
the Gateway Experience, episode 59.
Yeah, we talk about using these binaural beats to basically escape time and space. Yeah, man, I think you might have got a little peek. Parts of your brain might have got a little peek
Yes, I
into
think
like
so.
things not being normal.
And let me say, I was not expecting any kind of anything from that.
Oh
I
man.
will say also, I did this late at night and I went to bed not too long after that. I had very vivid dreams as well that night, last night.
Man, you were locking. Well, a lot of those sound waves are supposed to be theta waves, so they're supposed to put you like in a waking sleep state, almost like hypnosis.
That's kind of what it, you know what? That's a good way to describe it. I haven't done a lot of like where you're, like alert during sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Lucid dreaming.
lucid dreaming. I was like, what is that term? Um, lucid dreaming. I haven't done a ton of that. It has happened a little bit where like I wake up a little bit and I can go back into dreams and like be right there and then I can start making decisions on like in a conscious way about what's going to happen. I would say it was akin to that feeling physically.
Did you only try this once?
Yes. This was
Oh,
just
okay.
last night. This is the very first try that I'm reporting on.
All right. I'm gonna
Because
try it tonight.
I knew we were going to record tonight and I wanted to be able to report back from what we did on Friday.
That's awesome, man. Dude, thank you so much because I've been wanting to do it almost every day, but I keep I'm gonna do it tonight.
I highly suggested those links that you gave me just from YouTube work great, or at
Let's
least
make
just the one. I mean, I didn't try the one that was like obviously nobody else is going to know besides you, so I'm sorry. But the one that was like a guided something, I didn't do that one.
mhm.
The one that was just like this is the beat. I'm like that's the one. Let's go into this not knowing anything because I didn't want
Send
anybody
that.
to like tell me like you should do this or you should think that. It's like nah, if there's something to this thing connecting the parts of my brain, like it's just gonna happen by me
If
just letting
yeah,
it do it.
yes, exactly. And that's the whole idea is like a scientific way to get into like this astral travel. Um, I'm definitely going to use that same video as you. And
Hmm.
we should for those of you listening, I guess we should share the ones that work. I'm going to try different videos,
Yeah,
but
I can put it in when I need to. I need to get it back and put all the links up and stuff. But I can put one in on that one and label it or something, or maybe under our video section, I can put it there. poke around the website. I'm sorry.
Well, very, very cool, Kanye.
The video would work, actually. I'll probably just do it there. That'd be easier to drop a link there. That way they don't have to dig through source material to find it.
That's great, man. That's really great. I'm really glad you busted in and had that story. That's really cool, man.
Yeah, man,
I'm
I've
still,
been waiting. I've been waiting to tell you about it all day. Like, I wanted to text you and tell you about it, and I'm like, no, save it for the show. He's gonna enjoy this.
That is so fun. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was hoping that I would, if I can leave my body, I'm definitely gonna mess with you still.
Ooh, well, keep in mind, I'm already like ahead of you. So.
Yeah, that's true. We're gonna like try to one up each other until we're just like playing on the moon together.
You know what though, and I think the next thing I'm gonna try is that video that we're gonna put up. I wish I could remember the title of it. It doesn't matter. It's like 8 hours long, so you could potentially do this for like a whole night.
Yes.
And fall asleep with this, which that is my next plan.
That's my plan. Yeah, I want to lay in bed and just go to.
Well,
that's how Mr. Monroe. That's how Monroe started. Was he was trying to learn in his sleep, and he thought this would make him able to learn in his sleep, and then to his like shock, it made him like come out of his body.
Okay, well, I guess maybe on the next episode we might have a really crazy experience today, because I'm definitely going to try and sleep with headphones on tonight doing this.
Yes. That's amazing, man.
I may see you later tonight.
oh my God, please don't. What if we're both doing it? Yeah, man, if we both figure out how to do it, we got to hang out somewhere. We got to go to like the Empire State Building or something.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay, so I assume I'm going to give you a primer for the listeners and for you, just to remind you of where we left off. We're going through this like 300-400 page book by Zacharia Sitchen, who's the Annunaki Nibiru 12th planet guy. So far in our first two series, we talked about kind of cool stuff about Genesis that fits in with science, like the days of creation matching up with some like more recent scientific discoveries, like dinosaurs being birds, stuff like that. We talked about his theories that the Earth is actually part of a bigger planet that was named Tiamat, a big watery planet, and that there was a collision between our planet Tiamat and this planet that you might have heard of called Nibiru, which is supposed to be the 12th planet in our solar system that has a crazy different orbit. And so we're apparently part of this bigger planet. That's called like the Sky War, like War of the Gods, basically. And the reason why we have this knowledge, according to Sitchen, is that the inhabitants of Nibiru, which he calls the Annunaki, which is the name for the Sumerian gods, and also he connects them with the Nephilim in the book of Genesis. They basically were ancient astronauts who had all this knowledge just from scientific stuff, and they passed it down to us through Sumerian and Babylonian myths, and then also it kind of ended up encoded in different ways in the book of Genesis.
And that all lines up with a more detailed account about the Nephilim in the book of Enoch as well.
Exactly. And he actually gets into the book of Enoch in this portion. This might be the shortest portion. We're going to round out the rest of the book this episode, but he gets into that. Now, we also discussed basically, and here's where we left off. So this is where we'll be starting off this time, but he discussed, okay, so basically there's this whole Anunnaki soap opera. These astronauts from Nibiru came here to mine gold. And they basically brought their own workers with them. And there was a revolt of the Anunnaki workers because they're like, it's hot. They were in Africa mining gold. They're like, it's hot. We're mining gold all day. We don't like this. So this very clever leader named Enki, who's like the Sumerian god of like knowledge and wisdom and stuff like that, he pitched to his father that they would basically take cavemen or like Neanderthals and combine proto-people's DNA with the Anunnaki DNA, which creates what we think of as ourselves, of human beings. And so Sitchin lined this up with Genesis, and there's like this supposed contradiction in the Bible where there's like two creation accounts. And in one, he creates Adam and Eve, male and female, just like kind of as a set. And in another one, he creates Adam alone and then basically does this medical procedure, takes out a piece of a rib and makes woman out of it. So Sitchin gets into this whole soap opera of Enki and his sister slash girlfriend Ninti, who were both scientists, and described how they created the first Adam, and then they created, basically they found out that you would make these test tube babies, but the babies had to be brought to term inside of an Anunnaki mother. So the first Adam was like the first successful test tube baby, and then they started making humans two by two by basically having like these Anunnaki surrogate mothers who would, like, seven of them would have men and seven of them would have babies, or seven of them would have men and seven of them would have females. um and so that explains this, the apparent contradiction, and also explains like why we're so intelligent, because we're basically half Anunnaki. And then he just started to get into, at the end of part two, how the creation of Eve, which is described in the whole rib story, was actually detailing Anunnaki experiments to make humans fertile and able to have our own children. Because we started out as kind of like a mule, like this crossbreed, and we had to be brought to term inside the Anunnaki women, but we couldn't actually reproduce ourselves until they did further experiments and basically made us fertile. And that's where we left off. And that's considered like the creation of Eve is the creation of like giving us the ability to reproduce. So
Good catch up. Good catch up.
all right, thank you. So is chapter 9 is called Eve, the mother of all. And I have some segments here. He says many other studies have shown that some animals possess the capacity to repair damaged genes in their cells and thus halt or reverse the aging process. Every species clearly has a lifespan fixed by its genes. A single day for the mayfly, about 6 years for a frog, and a limit of about 15 for a dog. Nowadays, the human limit lies somewhere not much beyond 100 years, but in earlier times, human lifespans were much longer. According to the Bible, Adam lived to be 930 years old, his son Seth, 912 years, and his son Enosh, 905. Although there is reason to believe that the editors of Genesis reduced by a factor of 60 the much greater lifespans reported in the Sumerian texts, the Bible does acknowledge that mankind had much longer lifespans before the deluge or great flood. Patriarchal lifespans began to shorten as the millennia raced on. Terah, Abraham's father, died at an age of 205, and Abraham lived 175 years. His son Isaac died at age 180, and Isaac's son Jacob lived to be 147, but Jacob's son passed away at age 110. So it's clear we get into here. He's trying to explain the long lifespans, which obviously comes from us being part of these like Anunnaki who live for like thousands of years, is basically his explanation of it.
Okay.
And he bases that on and we'll get into one in particular, but the Sumerian histories talk about basically these god kings who are the Nephilim. And they just that's their lifespan. They live for thousands of years.
So we're basically, because we're moving farther and farther away genetically, like our lifespan's getting shorter, or did
Yeah, I
get
mean,
shorter.
so after
Obviously, since then it's fluctuated based on disease and famine and things like that.
yeah, like we inherited. He's always trying to make things scientific. So he basically says we inherited these long lifespans from the Anunnaki. But yeah, as like he says that it's basically genetic errors in our DNA every time we replicate. It's like we're becoming copies of a copy of a copy. And so it's this reducing lifespan is kind of like scientific evidence that we come from this thing that the original Anunnaki would have lived for like thousands of years, but we're like a copy of a copy of a copy, and every time you make a copy, it gets a little bit worse. So
Well, and
we're
if
like,
you're just purely looking for a scientific explanation, it's not a bad one.
no, it's not. That's the weird thing about Sitchin is like he's like all about using mythology and like combining it with science. And it's like, I don't know. It's just really interesting whether or not
There
you
have been a
believe it.
lot of twists and turns in this series, just in his train of thought, just everything.
Oh yeah, and wait,
Man,
this entire book takes a twist towards the end.
he can
Um,
take a hard left just at the drop of a dime, just
he
90
can't.
degrees. We're going this way now, everybody. Buckle up.
I know we're doing Anunnaki soap opera out of nowhere. We're talking about like he went into this like long thing about different animals that marry their sister, and then he did it again in like this third part of the book. He went back into like monkeys that like prefer their siblings
Is he
over.
still alive?
No, no, he died last decade.
Okay, so do we think he maybe had a thing for his sister, or
He makes you wonder. I don't know.
I mean, I didn't even put together that he brought it up twice until you just like, because I think they were spanned out far enough between the episodes, or maybe within the episode. I didn't even notice that.
Well, that's kind of what he does. Is he's so obsessed. He's so obsessive
With
about
things
like
sleeping with their sister.
Well, no, he's obsessed about making everything science. So like part of it appears to bother him that part of like the Sumerian myths about the Anunnaki include the fact that everyone's sleeping with their sister, that he has to like figure out a scientific explanation instead of just being like, well, that's their culture or whatever. He like has to explain it scientifically. So he gets into like, well, this bug does that and this monkey does that and this bird
As
does.
someone who's gotten bogged down into some weird things in some research, I get it. I probably shouldn't give him too hard of a time about it, really.
No. I mean, this is like, oh, I won't go
I
there.
could see how you
So
could spin off on the point, especially because, yeah, he is trying to explain it all very scientifically. And yeah.
even stuff that doesn't require, I mean, you don't require a scientific explanation for those people. I mean, we have intermarriages throughout human history. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You just be like, well, that's what they do. But he's like, no, I have to prove scientifically that it's a good thing to marry your sister, basically, which is like
Okay,
really
now
weird.
see, now when you say it that way, I'm teetering back towards my original comments. Sorry, Zach. I
Yeah,
apologize, man.
I get
I'm sorry.
it. Zach. You don't know him like that. So he says, while it's believed that genetic errors accumulate as DNA keeps reproducing itself in the cells, contribute to the aging process, scientific evidence indicates the existence of a biological clock in all creatures, a basic built-in genetic trait that controls the lifespan of each species. What that gene or group of genes is, or what makes it tick, what triggers it to express itself, are still matters of intense research. But the answer lies in the genes has been shown by numerous studies. Some on viruses show that they possess fragments of DNA that can literally immortalize themselves. And Enki must have known all that. He's the Anunnaki scientist who created man. So that when it came to perfecting the atom, creating a true procreating Homo sapiens, he gave Adam intelligence and knowing, but not the full longevity that the Anunnaki genes possess. And that's interesting. He doesn't, for some reason, he doesn't make the connection, but that's like a clear Genesis reference to when we ate the fruit of the tree of good and evil, we lost access to the tree of life.
Yeah.
Is that there's a trade-off. So I don't know.
He doesn't make that connection?
No, at least it's not in my notes. I would have written it down if he did, because it's interesting. But for some
Yeah.
reason, he just kind of says that sentence about knowing and lifespan being a trade-off, and then he just moves on. So this is
You
kind of
gotta
our.
fight your. He's trying to prove why everything needs to sleep with its sister, Dennis. There's not. You can't fight every battle.
That's the main takeaway I'm getting from this book.
I got you, Zach. Don't you worry, buddy.
So Sitchin also gives other clues showing that we're some sort of mixed creation, part monkey person, part Anunnaki. One of these that he uses that I found interesting was like our nonsense junk DNA. We just have a ton of DNA that seems to have no purpose. He says this is an obvious result of basically the experimentations, which, if you remember from part 2, he also says created like weird chimeras and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, which oddly enough ties into our last episode in the conversation we just had, is the 2 hemispheres of our brain. So, as we discussed in the Gateway Experience episode, the right hemisphere of our brain is very primitive. It doesn't know language.
It's the
The left,
ocean.
it's the ocean, and the left hemisphere is like the intellectual boss side that like names things, compartmentalizes things. It's where like what we think of as like intelligence comes from.
It's the office manager.
It's the office manager, and he's dealing with a very emotional, nonverbal employee. But he says, this is interesting because obviously we're the only animals that have that dichotomy, because we're the only animals that can do language and math and stuff like that. So he says, like, that's evidence that basically we're this hype, like the left side of our brain is like literally the Anunnaki brain, and then the right side is what we think of as like the caveman or monkey brain. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. So he goes into kind of the history of like what science thinks about evolution, which is that mankind arose out of southeastern Africa. He gets into kind of the vast time scale of evolution that's believed to have occurred. For instance, scientists think that we separated from four-legged apes around 14 million years ago, and that it took another 9 million years until apes started to have what we would think of as human or hominid aspects, like the Australopithecus. And the fossil time scale is like nearly blank. We create this timeline through like insanely small pieces of information. Like, we'll make total assumptions about like the human evolutionary process about like a small piece of a jaw or like a pelvis bone. Like, and I know scientists know what they're doing, but he's just trying to set the stage here for like, it's weird how little we really know and how much is assumptions. He mentions the famous discovery of Lucy, who is an author, Australopithecus, and I've included a picture of here compared to a Homo erectus, which was the thing that preceded us. Lucy basically looks like
Neither one of them attractive. I'm gonna be honest with you.
No, Lucy basically looks like a monkey. It's just we know she walked upright because we found some of her bones, and we kind of draw that conclusion. Homo erectus isn't quite to a human, but this is where he starts to get to the point of like going through evolutionary history, is that it took like 13 million years to get from what we would think of as an ape to get, or like a monkey, to get to Lucy, who still is basically like somewhere in between, but still very monkeyish. So it's like 13 million years took to get to that, but then like in a million years, stuff starts like speeding up. So the hominids, Homo erectus, Cro-Magnon man, and stuff like that, who started what we call the first Stone Age, they migrated out of Africa into the Asian continent around this 1.5 million year time frame. And then our history goes blank again because we have such few fossils from 1.5 million years to about 300,000 years ago.
Not a lot to write about, I'm gonna assume.
There's not. It's just like something happened, and then about 300,000 years ago, we start having evidence of like Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons, which were discovered in Germany. Now, human beings.
Maybe that's when all the people went inside the earth.
Oh, maybe.
I mean that half as a joke and half as a throwback to other research. I'm like, well, there was that mass exodus of people that supposedly went into the earth at different points in time.
When you
started civilizations there. So
maybe
that's why there's no fossils from that period, because a bunch of those people went inside the earth.
Whoa. Now we work, and also, I mean, these were really in reality cavemen.
Mm-hmm.
So we already were in caves. I know this is like a dry portion of the show, and it's really just something you could get from a biology textbook, but seeing these time frames laid out like knowing that there's like a 10 million year chunk
Yeah.
missing here and a 300,000 year chunk missing there, like, and then another million year missing chunk, it really does make you think about what you just said, the idea that the aliens, or what we think of as aliens, might be like subterranean creatures that could have
Could be.
like branched off somehow, evolutionary.
Maybe they came back and who knows? Maybe the Anunnaki came back and picked up a bunch of people to go farm another planet.
Ooh.
Come on, dummies, get in the ship. We got work to do.
That makes sense. Because in the whole story of Enki, like, we already had Homo erectus type people, and he's like, oh, that thing right there.
And he's like, man, these things are growing like weeds. We need to like move a bunch of it, transplant them, grow these other places.
That's kind of what happened. So,
wait, really? That's where you're getting ready to tell me this is going?
Well, we're not going into like farming other planets, but like that's actually a really good idea, and that might explain why a lot of like abductees and like contactees describe the aliens as being like basically people sometimes.
Ooh.
It could be us that got picked up to go mine another planet.
And we did better there, and now we're coming back, following the clues home.
At some point,
but we don't look like home anymore.
I'm gonna have to do an episode or two on his book, The 12th Planet, because he refers back to it so often. It's kind of weird that I started on this book of his because he's like not known for it. It's the 12th planet that he's known for. And this really, when I finish this book, and he takes a weird left turn towards the end that we're going to get into. When I finish this book, I realized that basically this book is almost, it's very interesting to tie it into Genesis. And I know we kind of have like a Christian perspective on the show. So I'm glad we're starting here, but it's very clear that this is almost like a commercial at points for like his other book. It's like he has this theory about the Anunnaki and stuff, and he's like, well, let's see if I could use the Bible to like retell that story. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just, it's.
Do you think he shocked himself at how well things lined up?
Yeah, I think he did.
Oh man, I did not realize. I thought this was just going to be a quickie.
It really did. So just to recap, human beings show up around 350,000 years ago. And he mentions a discovery in Israel, actually, or I think around Nazareth, actually, it has nothing to do with Jesus, that actually places human beings living side by side with Neanderthals in that region for thousands of years. So we were like coexisting, probably mating. There were like it was like Middle Earth, man. It's like you have the dwarfs and the hobbits and the people and the elves. And
so when did Homo sapiens show up?
We start showing up. Oh, I'm sorry. We do show up, I believe, a couple 100,000 years ago, but he said that we didn't take over the land from the Neanderthals until about 35,000 years ago.
Okay.
So there was like some sort of leap, or we went like hostile on them, and we like took their. There's evidence from other stuff I believe that we've done.
Like tried to revolt against the Anunnaki.
Like no, that for some reason human beings like had been living and mating and stuff with Neanderthals, and then like something flipped like 35,000 years ago. Maybe it's the Ice Age. And we just started killing them. We like killed off the Neanderthal.
We finally developed into the human beings we are today.
It kind of sounds like
everything that doesn't look like me as quickly as possible.
It kind of sounds like very close, and he doesn't get into this either, but it sounds like very close to around the time that he alleges we got all this new intelligence from the gods or the Anunnaki. We like turned on our monkey brethren. And we're like, there's not room for both of us anymore. It's all us.
You know what? That sounds like the most human thing we could do. It really does.
Yeah. And also, oddly, I've always wondered when they say, oh, well, people from this region have like this percentage of Neanderthal DNA. I've always been like, for like the scientific definition of a species is like the ability to mate together. So wouldn't that make Neanderthals and people the same thing? You know what I mean? Like this whole theory of his, while I don't like I don't buy into it, like thinking intellectually, it would offer an explanation of the final leap like our evolution, you know what I mean? Like how we became one step above like the Neanderthals and all that stuff, and like why we stopped breeding with them and just got to the business of like taking over Earth.
We got
Because
smart enough to realize we were smarter than them,
we ended up being
and
half.
that they could eventually figure out how to be what we are, and so we got to stop that right now. We are the
Exactly.
thing.
We're the thing. We're half Anunnaki. We're taking over the world. So because he says, because a person's DNA keeps getting mixed by the genes of the generational fathers, comparisons of the DNA in the nucleus of the cell, which comes half from the mother and half from the father, do not work well after several generations. It was discovered, however, that in addition to the DNA in the cell's nucleus, some DNA exists in the mother cell, but outside the nucleus in bodies which are called mitochondria. And for those of you who remember fifth grade science, that's the powerhouse of the cell. And this is actually true. You hear a lot about this in like apologetics, but it's like a true thing about genetics. Is that you can like perfectly trace back your lineage of women in your family using mitochondria. It's like perfectly preserved somehow. I don't understand enough about biology to understand how, but this is like a basic scientific fact.
Interesting.
So this DNA does not get mixed with the father's DNA. Instead, it's passed down unadulterated from mother to daughter to granddaughter and so on through the generations. This discovery by Douglas Wallace of Emory University in the 1980s led him to compare this mtDNA or mitochondrial DNA of about 800 women in a study. The surprising conclusion, which he announced at a scientific conference in July of 1986, was that the mitochondrial DNA in all of the 800 women appeared to be so similar that these women must have all descended from a single female ancestor.
See, that sounds more like a theory towards Eve than it does for Anunnaki, because if they were doing 7 and 7, that would have been slightly different DNA. Unless those 7 mothers are all like clones of something.
Well, let's get into what scientists say for a minute. That is, well, basically what it means is he did one study.
Yeah.
He picked 800 people at random, and he's like, oh, I'll be darned, they all have the same female ancestor. That's all that means. So,
okay.
This is actually, there's a word for this in science. It's called the Mitochondrial Eve.
Really?
And this is a single woman who lived...
it doesn't sound like she was single for very long.
No, she wasn't single. She lived between 300,000 and 180,000 years ago. We know this by like the way that genes work. And it turns out she's literally, unless the odds are like 99.99999%, this one woman, it turns out, is actually the mother of every living human who's alive today.
So literally Eve.
Literally Eve. Ever since this study in the 1986, they've done studies on people from Europe, Africa, Aboriginal people, basically every people group in the world. They've done this mitochondrial test on, and it always goes back to the same ancestor.
Whew.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you? I know how you could argue with that. You could make this Anunnaki argument but still that leads to an Eve. Whichever thing you want to believe, whether it's biblical or this Anunnaki thing or both,
there is an Eve. There is an Eve, and we know that. We know that, like even secular scientists.
I've never heard this before. I did not know that.
Oh yeah, look at Mitochondrial Eve. It's great, man. There's also something very similar for Adam, but we're not going to get into it.
You know, it sounds like it'd be a good procedural, like doctor show too.
Mitochondrial Eve.
Yeah,
that's it. I'm adding that to my spec script list
this fall on CBS.
So this is just a fact, and I kind of had forgotten about it for a while. I guess it's maybe why me and you never discussed it, but
back on me.
This is real, man. We know that Eve, I mean, you say what you want about. I mean, the argument is like, did the Garden of Eden exist? Was that the first woman? The argument is like, was it the first woman or was it another? In Sitchin's world, this would essentially be the first woman who was modified to be able to give birth.
Yeah.
So Genesis does call Eve the mother of all who lived, and it turns out there is one woman in the past who scientifically is the mother of all who lived. And we also know from the Bible that Adam and Eve didn't begin having children until they were expelled from Eden.
Yep.
Now, when they got out of Eden, they first had Cain and Abel, and we all know how that went down. But then they had Seth, and Seth was their third child, which is what the line that led to Noah and Moses and all that came from. So Seth had Enosh. And the Bible says that it was in the time of Enosh, who would be Adam and Eve's grandson, that human beings first started calling on the name of God or Yahweh. In the biblical tale of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, the antagonist of the Lord God, who has caused them to acquire knowing, or as Sitchin states, he equates the knowledge of good and evil to understanding the ability to procreate.
I can see that.
And other people, this isn't just a Sitchin thing. That's one interpretation of the Bible.
Well, a lot of biblical stuff, a lot of early Hebrew stuff refers to sleeping together as knowing each other.
Right.
To have sex, to know each other.
Right. It's not like the official church doctrine that's what the knowledge of good and evil is, but it's an interpretation that's not too uncommon. So obviously, for those who know the book of Genesis, the antagonist who teaches them about the knowledge of good and evil is the serpent, or the Nahash in Hebrew. The term Nahash has two other meanings. Quote, he who knows secrets and he who knows copper, oddly enough.
Is this where are we about to go into Enoch? We're about to go into Enoch, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you do it. I'll let you do it. I'll let you do it.
Then you got to chime in because I still have.
I'm going to, but I'm just like trying not to. I'm trying not to jump all over any of it.
So these other meanings of the word plays are found in the Sumerian epithet Buzur for Enki, which was meant he who solves secrets and he of the metal mind. So the same two meanings of Nahash in Hebrew. Also, someone who mines copper and somebody who knows things also apply in the Sumerian text to Enki, which is very odd.
And that was one of the specific fallen angels that Enoch talks about, is this one that taught us how to use metals. And they were all teaching us secrets.
Right. So Sitchin just says, well, this is Enki. And oddly enough, not only does Enki mean he who mines and he who solves secrets or riddles or whatever, the emblem of Enki is actually entwined serpents.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so Enki's symbol is entwined serpents, and it was the symbol of his cult center in Eridu. Of his African domains in general and of the pyramids in particular, and it appeared on Sumerian illustrations on cylinder seals of the events described in the Bible. So
Enki's really starting to sound a lot like Lucifer.
Yeah, he does, man. He really does. He sounds. It's like he's like all these things start combining. He's like Lucifer. He's also like the Nephilim. He's the serpent. It's all.
Well, after reading the book of Enoch, I'm convinced that Lucifer, the serpent, is one of those angels that's described in the book of Enoch. I'd need my note. I'd have to pull it up to be able to tell you which one it is. Like they go through a specific list of basically God tells Enoch, this is what all of them did, because they've sent Enoch at one point to go talk to God to basically they figured out that they've been figured out, and they're like, oh no, we messed up bad. Hey, Enoch, can you take a letter for us to God and just kind of smooth things over a little bit? We didn't realize we're baby angels. We didn't know. We learned a couple things and we got crazy. So Enoch goes, and I won't spend too much time on it because I need to do this just as its own thing. But Enoch goes, and basically God laughs at them. Is like, it's funny, like the thing that I created below them, they're sending to now talk to me for them. But he goes through and he lists each one of these fallen angels' crimes against humanity. Like, this one taught them this one taught them about jewelry, this one taught them about metals, this one taught them weaponry, this one taught them language, different things, magic, things like that. And
You
I forget which one it
know,
is, but this sounds very specifically like I don't have the name off the top of my head, but this sounds like one of the ones that got described in there.
yeah, copper, and then also like just like weapons and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of their thing, and yeah, I wish I knew to have that off the top of my head or whatever. But yeah, there was one that when I read through the book sounded very much like Lucifer.
Keeping an open mind, um, as we do. I guess this doesn't contradict the Bible because you could think of it as, prior to Enki's experiments or whatever, which ultimately just gave us a bigger brain or knowledge of things, we still existed.
Yeah,
It's not saying Enki didn't start from scratch. He started from like monkey people. So we would still be a creation of God that he was working with just to give greater knowledge.
yeah.
Yeah, that just occurred to me.
It's it's a shaky base, but I can go with you on it.
It's
I
shaky.
I do agree.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't believe that obviously, but like I it's just it kind of because it's kind of interesting because I keep thinking as I was going through this book, so Enki is both God and the devil. It's like what's going on here? He's
Yeah.
like everyone basically. And so I guess God would still be God. He would have created us, just Enki would have given us the brain power, I guess.
I think you're giving him a little bit more leeway than what he's actually going for, just based on what you've divulged in
Oh
all of
no,
this.
no. In Sitchin's world,
It's just the Anunnaki. It's
yeah, in
just
Sitchin's world, God's first name, Elohim or whatever, does mean the Anunnaki.
yeah.
Yeah, so in his world, it literally is the God and the devil and all that. So not only is Enki's sigil basically the entwined serpents, that's also the symbol today for medicine, and it also represents, many believe, the double helix structure of the DNA.
So
Which,
you know what, the medicine thing has always it freaked me out as a kid. I'm gonna be honest with you. When I saw that like on nursing uniforms and stuff, or like the Red Cross, Red Shield, or whatever, or blue, or whatever it was. You know what I'm talking about?
mm-hmm.
Like paramedics, I think wore it. Like it was everywhere there for a while. Like it seemed
Yeah, it
like when
goes.
we were kids.
It's still around. I mean, like health insurance companies use it.
It's just always
Now,
had a weird feel to it. Like I know there's a story behind it on like I don't know. I'm not even gonna guess at what it is.
well, there's actually two. There's two symbols with similar names that people often mix up, and one of them is the double serpents. The medicine one actually, some people. It's kind of interesting. I For some reason I got into reading this one day, like a couple months ago. So the medicine one is actually technically just one snake.
Is
But
it?
there's a very it's yeah, so like it comes from like Greek stuff, Greek mythology, and it's just one snake wrapping
Was
around
I
a
seeking
staff.
medical care at cult facilities? Is that what's been happening this whole time?
Well, no, what happened is
They did burn a lot of weird incense in there. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like there was a lot of mixing potions going on in the back that didn't seem sterile at all.
this does not seem like science.
Okay,
So
so
what
what's the
basically what
two then?
happened, okay, so this is off topic, but just so you
Yeah, I gotta
know,
know
because
now.
so there's actually two symbols there that have been used since ancient times. One is just one snake around a staff. The other's two. They have two different names. They have two different origins. I guess the idea of a snake wrapped around a staff is just interesting for some reason, or either that or Enki existed.
I feel like
But
that has some sort of a Moses connotation, doesn't it? With the desert?
well, no, I think you're thinking of when he used the staff and it became a snake to
Mm,
eat the snakes that were created by the pharaoh's magicians.
The bad thing about surprising each other with topics and stuff sometimes, Dennis, is we're not always fully prepared for what the other one's going to say.
That's okay. No.
Keep going.
So anyway, side topic, but
Yeah.
these are two different
Quick
symbols.
overview.
The technical Greek one for medicine is the one snake, but because they're so similar, people would like mistakenly use the two snake one, and then also, I mean, they'll
What
say
is
like,
the
well,
two snake one?
the two snake one is this Enki symbol.
Oh,
It's
it
like
is the Enki symbol. Okay, I was waiting for some other like organization, like this is the firefighters that use that or whatever.
Well, no, like, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. Because people mistakenly use the 2-1 for so long, it's kind of also become the medicine.
So
it could be
the Anunnaki symbol on medicine and stuff.
Right. So it could be one or two snakes.
Oh, wow.
And like technically it began as the one snake one, but then this other two snake one started getting used, and now it's like you're just splitting hairs if you're like, well, technically that's not the medicine symbol. It's like, well, people started using it as that because they were dumb or whatever, and now we have both.
Look, this is a new fun thing I'm about to start informing strangers about out in public every time I see it. Like every time I see the double thing, I'll be like, "That's for the Anunnaki right there. Do you know
that's
about
technically
the Anunnaki?"
wrong. Right.
And then we're in a long conversation that they try and get away from for a long time about Anunnaki.
It is weird. Now they're both associated with like medicine. Like it is weird though that the two snake thing does represent, or does he says represents, but it is weird that it resembles the double helix of DNA, which nobody knew about until like way later, like the 50s.
Yeah, that's upsetting a little bit.
So, and that would make sense because Enki is supposed to be a genetic scientist.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense that his symbol would be what, because as Sitchen said in the other parts of this series, they wanted, once we gained their intelligence, they wanted to teach us stuff, but they oftentimes put it in myth and stuff so that we could understand. Because we're like baby intelligent creatures. We don't, we're just starting out here. We can't.
There's
give us
a lot of condescending talk going on, I feel like, between early humans and Anunnaki.
Oh yeah, like remember how they described the planets colliding as like a war of the gods or whatever? Yeah, exactly.
Like made it a nursery rhyme for us, essentially.
So he notes it's interesting that his double snake thing resembles DNA, which is exactly the genetic code and stuff he would have used to create the atom, and then eventually to create the mitochondrial Eve. So the emblem of Enki as a sign of healing was invoked by Moses when he made a Nahash Nefshith, as you said, a copper serpent to halt an epidemic afflicting the Israelites. And that's also the copper meaning, which is very interesting.
Yeah, the snake thing with Moses was he put the snake on the staff, and when the people got bit, they looked upon the staff and they were healed. That's what it was. Thank you.
Yeah, it was the copper serpent. Yeah.
Okay.
So
I know that was in there. That's an Exodus story.
That's one of the odder parts of the Bible. Is when he makes a that is, I know there's stuff that people are like, oh, that's weird, but like Moses making like a snake statue that you look at and it heals you from snake bites. The
whole book of Exodus is pretty crazy.
It's pretty weird. Yeah, that's one of the weirder.
Oh yeah, there's some wild stuff going on. Like you got, Lucifer magicians doing stuff against God's magician, basically.
Somehow that feels less weird though. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's scripture, but it's just, I don't know. It's like when I finally, as an adult, was like, I'm going to read the whole Bible. When I like finally went through it, like I remember the weirdest stuff was like in that like Numbers and Exodus and stuff like all the health codes. It's just like, whoa. It's just, it just kind of blows you away.
Yeah, Numbers and Deuteronomy get a little sticky.
So
there's some weeds to whack through.
So we get into like one of the penultimate chapters, which is called When Wisdom Was Lowered from Heaven. And Sitchen goes back into Sumerian history. And there is basically this long list of kings that's kept on the Sumerian tablets who ruled different cities. And it's recorded chronologically. So we actually know chronologically, we can date these things in history, which is interesting because the Sumerians were one of the first to have a calendar. And this is actually divided. We're finally getting to the flood part of Genesis. This is divided between time before the Great Flood and after the Great Flood. Now, for whatever reason, prior to the flood, all of the rule on Earth of these kings was the Anunnaki gods, who interestingly ruled with, quote, their sons by the daughters of man, which is like which is directly correlates with the Nephilim part of the Bible prior to the Great Flood and Noah.
The Nephilim came down and laid with the the daughters of man, yeah.
So it's directly references Sumerian mythology. Now, for whatever reason, after the flood, they basically let humans be kings. And that's when, like, the timeline we think of history technically begins.
This is when they lost interest in the project, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it sounds like they got all the gold or they wanted to go home or something. And, interestingly
they had to go
enough,
check up on the other colonies from that group of people that they took all the history from 3000 BC to whatever it was, 50,000 BC or whatever, where there's that big gap.
They have to figure out where those people are.
They got bored. They decided they were going to do other thing. And now they got cooler Earths than other places with humans doing better stuff, probably.
It's interesting that when historians, and again, he doesn't make this, sometimes Sitchin's like this genius. He makes all these connections you'll never think of. Then he'll just miss something like weirdly obvious. So when historians look at the Sumerian tablets, they basically say, okay, well, everything before the flood is like obviously myth because there wasn't some dude named Enki who lived for 30,000 years. But everything after the flood, that's real history. We'll count that as real history.
Okay.
But because then the kings are people and they're not living for 30,000 years. But it is interesting that after the flood, so not that soon after in the biblical narrative is when Abraham arrives.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it is kind of like also a very common biblical scholar thing to say that there's a lot more mythology involved prior to Abraham, but everything from Abraham onward, that's history. Is something you'll read when you read a lot of apologetic stuff. So like, it's interesting that like there's this flood that may or may not have actually happened, but we all agree like the history after that is real, but before that it's like mythology. So I don't know.
It's a weird. Okay, I'm not gonna get bogged down here.
Yeah, I won't either. So, also, I mean, there's like few things biblically more contested than the flood. I mean, there's scientists who think there was something, so whatever.
Yeah.
So the Sumerian legends state that the system of government that the Babylonians had was gifted to us by the Nibiru people, stating that the king's list begins with the words, "When kingship was lowered from heaven." The Sumerian texts tell of Enki, who was groomed by the gods to be the first priest, and relate how the gods, quote, showed him how to observe oil and water, secrets of Anu in Enki. They gave him the divine tablet, the engraved secrets of heaven and earth. They taught him how to make calculations and numbers. So I remember earlier how I was saying there was that, remember earlier, like an episode ago, when I was saying there was this human being who was like groomed to be basically the first priest. He was like groomed to be a helper of the Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently he learned things from these tablets, which Sitchin believes is like a computer tablet or compact discs of some sort that contain the sum of Anunnaki knowledge about things, including
they brought him 2000s technology.
Yeah, apparently they're rolling up with DVDs up in here. So
and then they made Blu-ray and everything got better.
So he notes that Enoch, and here we go, my man.
Mm-hmm.
Enoch, who was taken up into heaven in Genesis after 365 years, and the book of Enoch specifically, which is extra canonical, offers details that corroborate this story, as Enoch was shown and given knowledge on, quote, heavenly tablets as well. Yep. So Enoch, I guess, is Imduranki. It's just a different name for the guy.
Enoch also appeared to be some sort of possibly a scribe for the Nephilim.
That's kind of what
Like he has a bunch of information about them and like how they work and how they interact. Like it was very obvious in the writing that he was spending a large amount of time with them, and they were somehow kind of making him privy to who they were, or at least letting him see behind the scenes kind of how they did what they did.
That's kind of what Sitchin is saying, is they created people, and then just like any other kind of like conquester who has like the working drones, and then they have ones that they let closer to the inside. He's saying that like the first human priest, who he says is Enoch or Untitled, was basically groomed to like help them more in the inner chambers, and that's how like the priesthood got started.
Yeah.
Um,
And that lines up with the book of Enoch really, really closely.
Yeah, Enoch
kind of describes everything. He doesn't come out and say that, but just what he's describing sounds like this.
Enoch showed potential, and he was being groomed to be like the aliens, like house servant, basically.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's how he got invited up on that spaceship to see all the stuff he saw, basically.
But then later on in the book of Enoch, he's still able to communicate like with his grandchildren and stuff. Like there's other interactions where they talk about going and talking to Enoch, but Enoch's dead or gone. Not dead, gone.
Oh.
So the book of Enoch, I just may need to do a deep dive into this for us just to tie in with all this early civilization stuff we're doing.
But it makes sense too if he was the first, because Enoch like walked with God, quote unquote. And like I've read some stuff that says, oh, that's an allegory for the sun because he lived 365 years and 365 days, etc. But
all right, that's all right.
Just putting my suspension of disbelief and like getting into what Sitchin believes, like it would make sense that if you were like the first human being who they trusted like on the inside, it would make sense that like a reward might be that they'll like take you to their planet or something like that.
Yeah.
So getting
do a good job helping us get all these people in line, and then we'll take you to the motherland.
We'll bring you to Nibiru, and we'll make sure you never die because we got this technology and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know, man. Stuff's starting to click here. So
it's coming together in weird ways. It really is.
So Sitchin then gets into more historical facts about the Sumerians and what's called the calendar of Nippur, which is actually the first human being calendar that we know exists in history. It was also the first calendar that based itself on the sun and like the equinoxes, etc. It's basically what we still use today. Now, the Jewish calendar is still actually directly based on the calendar of Nippur, which was like a Babylonian thing. I did not know this. I did not know that. Well, it makes total sense because they don't believe in Jesus. But like in Jewish calendar years, it's the year 5,781 this year.
Really?
Yeah, because they didn't start recounting. They've just been counting. So I mean, I don't know why it's never occurred to me, but so. I
didn't realize that's how far back their calendar went.
Yeah, they're going farther than 578. Yeah. That's when. Yeah, so basically, creation, according to them, happened around 5,800 years ago. And just for reference, I looked this up. That would put the creation of the Earth at what we think of as 3,761 years before Christ. Or if you're in Sitchin world, then basically 5,000 to 6,000 years ago is when we got our full brain upgrade.
Okay.
So Sitchin notes that we know ancient cultures, both in Babylonia or Babylon, Egypt, China, used their holy temples also as constellation observatories, which is true. And also I never thought of this, might explain why like the pyramids and different ziggurats and also Chinese temples and pyramids all seem to be aligned with like solar equinoxes and stuff, and they seem to be along the same parallels. He basically says, well, that's just a scientific explanation because the Annunaki knew where to build their stuff to see the stars the best and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I guess if you don't believe in the Anunnaki, I guess primitive people probably had the same knowledge. They're like, oh, from that point, that's the best point to see things. And that's why things are kind of on the same lateral parallel. It's not like a conspiracy or like they're communicating. It's just like
Yeah, but if you can't travel long, if you're not traveling like long distances to see what something looks like for different points in the earth, how would you know that?
yeah, but every civilization that built pyramids and stuff had some sort of longitudinal. They were up and
Yeah,
down.
that's
You know
true.
what I mean? It
Okay.
wasn't like small pockets of people. So Sitchin believes that Enki was also the Egyptian god Thoth, who gave knowledge to the Egyptians. God of like he's that god that teaches the humans things, Prometheus, etc. As
Or
well
the
as
Egyptians.
or the Egyptians, yeah, as well as Quetzalcoatl, to the ancient Americans, like the Mayans, Aztecs, both of these gods are also oddly associated with serpents. I think it's very. I've never thought before, like, why so many human cultures associate snakes with being smart. I guess they look like sly little beasts. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
weird. But I guess that was like his sigil was the DNA thing. So that's why, I guess. Um, and then he takes this detour. It's a pretty deep detour into the Sumerian number system and writing system, the cuneiform. And oddly enough, I did not know this. So the Sumerian number system was based on the number 60, which is why we still use that today for time. And we still use that for circles.
Really?
360. Yeah.
Huh.
Three,
Okay.
three, six. So that's why we have 360 degrees in a circle. That's why we have 60 minutes in an hour, etc.
Okay.
We just kept that from the Sumerians. Now, oddly, he mentions, and this gets a bit convoluted, that the first number system, the Sumerian system, did not count up. Every time that we see this system used for counting, it actually counted down for
That's
whatever reason.
that seems very counterproductive in a lot of applications.
It does, but he has but he says he thinks he can explain this. So the number, instead of starting from 0 and then going up to whatever, the Sumerian number system actually starts with a number that's way too big for any ancient civilization to be thinking about, which is 12,960,000.
Okay.
And that number is apparently, I didn't check this out, is apparently 3,600 times 3,600. It's the square of 3,600.
Okay.
And
I'll trust you
36
on that.
and 3,600, according to his other research, is the length of time of planet Nibiru's orbit.
Mm.
So that's where we get numbers from, is the number 3 is planet Nibiru's orbit, which actually, it sounds convoluted, but we base a lot of stuff off 365. You know what I mean? Like we base a lot
360,
of
you
stuff
mean?
off. We have 360, but also like I think some lunar calendars are the number 360. Human beings base a lot of stuff around our orbit,
Yeah.
so it's like it wouldn't be that weird if they taught humans. Oh, the big number is 3,600 because that's how long it takes us to go around the sun. Like that wouldn't be like that weird. So he goes into a tangent about how God spoke directly with Adam and Eve in the Bible, and how this corresponds with scientific evidence that there might have been some sort of mother tongue or first language that all of humans spoke, which I guess in his worldview would have been the language taught to us by the Anunnaki.
In
And
biblical terms, it'd be whatever language was before the Tower of Babel.
yeah, exactly. Yep, there we go. He's just at this point, like we spent like 10 chapters like going at length of things, and now he's just spitting off Genesis
Just boom,
facts.
boom, 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 boom. I gotta crank this thing out and get it finished. I've
Right.
written how many chapters on this? Oh, we gotta wind this down. I
We
got a
hit
little
10.
long-winded on chapters 4 through 7. There, I gotta ring it in a little bit here.
Yeah, exactly. Like the first third of the book was literally just the planets colliding.
Yeah, it was that first one was we didn't get very far. It didn't feel like it was
No,
like
then
we
we
did in
did
the book, but like as far as what he was talking about.
no, and then we did basically the creation of man almost entirely in that second episode, and
Yep.
then I wrapped it up here, and then now he's just like connecting every dot. So he does
Well, he
mention
set the table. He's got everything in place. Now we're gonna get to the work.
he does because he has more important stuff to get to. So There's the time period around 12,000 years ago, which he believes is like right after the flood, when many proto languages emerged. According to linguistics, this is when like Proto-Latin, Proto-Slavic languages, etc., started to emerge. So this would be like after the Tower of Babel.
Well, and back to the 3600 thing, don't we know that our orbit used to be faster because we're getting farther away from the sun, so it was only 360 days at one point around the sun?
Yeah, I think that's true.
I'm
I
pretty sure.
think.
I don't know if it was 360, but it was a slightly smaller number if you go back several thousand years. Because we were
Yeah.
just marginally closer to the sun because we're slowly spinning out away from it.
Now, I would assume just logically that if it was a 5 day, it couldn't, maybe back in some point in history, like maybe prehistory.
Well, that's what well, back to this Anunnaki time is essentially what I'm saying.
Yeah, possibly. Although 5 days is a lot, and then like 10,000 years, that would mean that like I don't know, but yeah, you could be correct. He also notes that this 13,000 year period is around when he thinks that Mother Eve basically was created by the
Okay.
Anunnaki. Although that also scientifically really goes back to like 130,000 years ago. So again, he draws so many connections that sometimes
Yeah.
they might contradict themselves. So he goes into at this point, and this just kind of wraps up the. I was very shocked. I could have maybe done this as a two-parter if I was a little more industrious getting through this book. This is the last part. He gets into what he calls the fruits of Eden, noting that around 10,000 years ago BC was a big time for the cultivation of plants. It was when we domesticated dogs. It's when we domesticated sheep. It's basically the beginning of what we consider human civilization.
What was a wild sheep like? You don't have to answer that. I'm sorry.
I've wondered that. I used to wonder all the time about cows. Like, how did you exist? Then
I assume the bulls protected them.
well, they were aurochs. And that's a whole reading exercise you need to get into.
I'm sorry. Let's not spin this off and do a cow episode.
You need to look into what an auroch is.
This
it was
week
like
on Cryptic Accounts, the history of cows.
Someday we might. I mean, I've considered doing. I've considered getting into that. Getting into that
Cows.
topic. Actually,
How'd they make it?
Well, you know the Nazis. So the aurochs, an animal that. So
I just
the
love that sentence. You know how'd cows make it? You know the Nazis.
So there was this animal. I'm going into a tangent. So I'm going to
leave
interrupt
the Nazi cows for another episode. Let's just keep moving.
Okay, all right. There are literally Nazi cows, but we'll leave that for another episode.
Oh God, I want Nazi cows so bad.
They exist. Do you want to know?
I'm assuming they're just cows that really don't like any other race.
So, yes, they're cows that.
All right, we're just getting silly.
No. Okay, so I'll just briefly explain since we're doing tangents, and the listeners might want to know now.
Okay.
Maybe we'll never get into this. So
they just have little mustaches. All right, I'm sorry. Keep going.
The cows were milk mustaches. The cows were domesticated from a European animal that some people actually think might have been behemoth in the Bible. And we know that what we call it is the auroch. And it was basically a massive bull that was like really fierce. We know these things existed. We know that's where cows came from. And it actually took thousands of years, according to regular history. Now, Sitchen says this all happened very fast, and he might be correct because we don't have like actual evidence of how long it took to domesticate cows. But we suspect it took thousands of years to take them from this like very ferocious beast to cows. Now, Hitler liked the idea of the auroch because it's this ferocious European animal. He would. And he actually commissioned a Nazi program to breed, to reverse the evolution of cows back to super cows, back to aurochs.
Man, they had so many bad policies, but the rate at which these people got things done is just astounding. The research that they got done in not a very long period of time.
It is amazing.
Like they really went like they were doing stuff in the 20s, but like the 30s hit and bam, like that next decade, they just went nuts.
They're like, it's the Depression. We need jobs. Create super cows. And they did. They didn't.
It does solve a problem.
Obviously, that's not the way evolution works. So they didn't quite get there, but they did succeed in breeding
Humongous
what can
cows.
only be described as like humongous aggressive Nazi cows. And obviously, just like go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's exactly the kind of cow you'd expect from a Nazi. Just aggressive and large.
And these actually, I think some of them might still exist because, like, when
they're hiding out down in South America.
When exactly, but when we took over Europe, when we conquered Nazi Germany,
the cows were the last line of defense. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Get through this.
Some of the British scientists who were interested in biology stuff were like, "Oh, save some of those super Nazi cows." So there are actually headlines, if you Google it, of like Nazi cow escapes Worcestershire farm and like tears up the community.
The listeners are doing it right now.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be doing it as soon as this show's over.
Google like large.
I'm gonna try and remote view one later tonight.
I don't know if they still exist or if the project was abandoned, but
at least I'll hop through time and space to find one of them.
Oh yeah, I want to see an auroch.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about the Nazi ones, but yeah, I'll go back and look at one of those too. I'm really kind of curious about this Nazi experiment, though.
So I know it's very interesting. So Sitchen says, though, he says this happened like way too fast for natural selection. He doesn't really take into account the fact that we can breed things very quickly like dogs, but I guess he does have a point that like domesticating something should take a very long time, and it appears to have happened very quickly around 10,000 BC. Now the Sumerian texts state that this was actually the work of the Annunaki, who had genetic manipulation to help them and to speed up the process.
Well, they've got this weed growing that they can't figure out how to feed fast enough because there's so many of them. Like, I cannot believe how quick these humans want to reproduce. It's all they want to do is just make more humans. It's their favorite thing.
We made these monkeys smarter. We made them safe. And now they're just breeding like rabbits. So Sitchen actually says that our memory encoded in Genesis of the Garden of Eden was actually the bioengineering farm where what we consider today to be our main fruits, our vegetables, and our animals, including dogs, sheep, cows, etc., were brought forth faster than science can fully explain. Now that also, and I won't go as deep into this as Nazi cows because it's not as interesting. You should Google
Nazi cows.
You should Google sometime what different fruits look like back in the day. It's nuts. It's nuts. Not a single fruit we think of even looked edible. Like bananas were like a tiny seed field. That everything was weird. We have totally changed this earth. It's bizarre. Apples look totally different.
Really?
Yeah, it's interesting that we managed. You imagine like the Garden of Eden or like people in Africa like prior to civilization. You imagine them like plucking a big banana off a tree, like or an apple. Like it's amazing.
Why history might actually be an interesting episode at some point. Just the weird things that we've done to food.
Yeah, that actually would. Yeah, it's amazing we like got any nutrition at all when you look at like what fruits and vegetables used to look like. Like it was like you could pick 100 bananas and it was like barely any food. It was like full of seeds.
Vegetables were just gross and not healthy back then. It was just, what's the point?
Everything you see in the supermarket is a total man or Anunnaki made creation.
Huh. All right then. I mean, like I said, they had to figure out how to feed this crazy project that got way out of it. It feels like things maybe got a little out of control for the Anunnaki at some point. And they're like, look, we're going to take some of them and we're going to spread them out, and we are not going to let them do this fast ever again.
Again, Sitchen does not get into this, oddly, because he gets into everything else. The pre-Bible story of the flood, pre-Bible, we don't know which one was written first, but they think that like the Babylonians wrote it first. Okay. In that version of the story, the flood actually happened because we became we got too big, and the gods were like annoyed, and they're like, we got to wipe this out and start over.
You know what? That kind of tracks a little bit. That makes sense.
And that also tracks.
You're going with all of this. That makes sense.
Yeah, and it also oddly tracks with some parts of Genesis. So, for instance, Noah was actually the first husbandman or farmer. He was explicitly designated as the first farmer in Genesis. He's the first person to ever do that.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. He's the first person to grow grapes too. So, before that, it does not mention no ancestor prior to Noah actually farmed.
Abel did.
Ooh, no, he just brought fruits and vegetables as offerings. I don't think it says he
Oh,
farmed.
that's true. I guess it doesn't really. I don't know if it. I don't think you. I think you're right. I don't think it clarifies that he could have just been gathering them
He
essentially.
was a gatherer and Cain was a hunter.
Okay,
But Noah was the first to like grow.
I'll go with you on that. Okay.
So in essence, the Anunnaki, according to Sitchin, preserved basically what we would need to survive after they left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, from this genetic farm of Eden. And after that, they allowed us to take over our own rule for whatever reason after the flood. Now,
Bored with the project, as we've discussed.
when I got to this point in the book, I was like, I would really like to know. I'm really excited for the next 3 chapters because I would love to know why they left. I think I even used that as a cliffhanger last episode. I would love to know all this stuff. He just abandons talking about Genesis at this point.
In true Sitchin form.
In true Sitchin form. And chapter 11 is called Martian Space Base.
I don't want to play with Genesis anymore.
He's like, I want to talk about the Mars space base. And so,
To be honest with you, though, don't we kind of want to talk about the Martian space base? I mean, we've done it a couple times already, really.
We do. And so I'm just going to briefly go into what he goes into. But I mean, at this point, he gives lip service to Genesis, but it's like he's done. He said his piece. He needs 3 more chapters.
I mean, how many words is it at this point? He's tired. Sitchin's tired. He's like, I cannot believe I just wrote all of this.
He's thinking about Mars a lot. He wants to fit this in towards the end. So Sitchin goes into the Martian space base chapter, where he discusses how back in the day Mars was warmer. It likely had flowing water. It had a blue sky, and that this was not too far back in the past. Now,
by our recollections, probably 500,000 years based on remote viewing.
Yeah, not that long ago. Yeah, I think a million. Yeah, but not in like.
I know.
Human history.
You're right.
So, he veers into like a 10-page section where he talks about the Bush administration's plans to colonize Mars. Which was a real
political all of a sudden.
Which was weird because Bush actually did kind of bring up the idea of like space stuff. Which
he had some ideas.
He has some ideas.
More silly, but had some ideas.
So we're gonna colonize Mars. He gets into some interesting facts about Mars, which again have really nothing to do with Genesis. But
what does Sitchin want me to know about Mars?
Now, I took notes of what I thought was interesting because we're rounding out. If you came here for Bible stuff, you can turn the show off. So,
bye. Thanks for listening.
We're done.
Subscribe, please.
Sitchin's just like the rest of this book is going to be about Mars. He described
Okay, so Mars.
He described what's called the SNC group of rocks, which are some weird rocks that were found in the 1800s, and then study the last century showed that they're probably from Mars, which is weird. And they're estimated to be 1.3 billion years old. Nobody knows how they got here.
I've never heard of this before.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. That might be a thing at some point then. SNC group. So it's a group of rocks. Where are they?
We discovered them numerous places.
Oh, they're not all together. They're at different places like around the world.
Antarctica is a big one where we found a few of them.
Okay.
Oddly enough, it always goes back to Antarctica. They're 1.3 billion years old. We have no idea how they got here. For a long time, people thought they were meteorites, but then as we studied Mars more and we studied these rocks more, we're like, yeah, these rocks are from Mars, and we
know how when you go to the beach, you get like a bottle of sand, and then you take it back to your, house in, I don't know, someplace that doesn't have sand. I didn't want to pick on anybody. I'm sorry.
Well, we live in Kansas, so I mean that's fine.
I was just gonna say, I was like, well, I mean, are you really gonna beat yourself up right now, Patrick? Because you are those people.
Nothing wrong with not having sand.
I mean, that's true. But like, is it that sort of thing where it's like, we're from Mars, let's take a piece of Mars with us to this new place so that we have a little piece of Mars with us?
I
Because
mean,
there's the theories, that we're actually just Martians that escaped. I realize
oh,
that doesn't vibe with the Sitchen thing going on right now with the Annunaki. I guess
yeah.
it could. That could have been another colony.
Now that's basically what he's saying is that the Anunnaki had like another base there. He didn't get into whether or not there are people there, but that's why I was really interested
Well,
earlier.
according to that Israeli ex-defense space guy, we definitely do have a base on Mars, and the aliens are there.
Yeah, right. So he basically just says, "Hey, aren't these rocks weird? Somebody brought them here." Is basically what he says
And
in
he's
this
like,
part of the
now
book.
discuss amongst yourselves. Next chapter.
Yeah. So he discusses, he goes into, and I've included pictures here of the stuff we all know about. I say that like it's normal, but like the pyramids on Mars and the face on Mars. And we discussed that in previous episodes.
Man, the more these pyramids keep on popping up, like it's just crazy that whole remote viewing thing in the 80s or whatever. That's just like how much of that, I mean, we knew about some of it, but just it's weird.
Yeah. And they say it's like light tricks, but the more pictures I see, I like, nah, that's a pyramid.
When are we
Either
going to get
that,
a rover over there? That's my question. Is why didn't we land by any of this stuff?
right? Right? Well, we might get
I mean,
into the answer.
I know why. We know
We,
why. They don't want us to see that. That
yeah,
would
we're gonna,
confirm that something has lived there and created buildings.
yeah, and he has like a really good picture of the face here. And apparently, I did not know this until I read Sitchin. Another weird thing about the pyramids on Mars is, you know how like I was talking earlier about how our temples and pyramids line up with like the solstice and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The Martian pyramids line up with the Martian solstice
Shut
as well.
up.
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
Huh.
They're like exactly where you would build a pyramid
So it's
on.
almost like the same group of somebodies was there doing something, knew something worked, and then came here and did the same thing.
It's the Nibiru way.
Man, maybe they just wiped out all the gold on Mars and
Moved on.
the humans there destroyed the environment and then killed themselves. Possibly came here, maybe didn't, maybe we're just another group of, maybe they transplanted some of those who are like, oh man, you guys, we destroyed another one. All right, get a crop, get some of the good ones, and let's go over here to Earth. Let's start over there.
Either that or they went through Mars with their own slaves because they had their own slaves.
That's true too. Oh yeah, you're right. Again,
Uh,
look at me being a human and just thinking everything revolves around me in some way.
no, we were for the human project because we're hot. Mars was probably colder. It was easier to work on or whatever.
That's true. That could
And
be.
if you're on this planet that goes around the sun only every 360 or every 3,600 years, it's probably not very hot there. They probably like cold temperatures.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. The temperatures you would need to live inside of Nibiru. You could not live on the surface of Nibiru because the weather conditions would be so drastically changing all the time based on what you're
You're
around in
right.
space.
You're right.
That's weird.
Oh man, good one, dude. I love doing this show. So so then Sitchin goes into a tangent about the Sphinx. He says that it's perfectly aligned with the 13th parallel, which I believe is also aligned with, like, obviously the Sphinx is in that complex with the pyramids and also a bunch of other pyramids throughout the world. And he believes that the Sphinx's nose actually points towards a space base in the Sinai Peninsula, and then doesn't really get too into that. He says, even more interesting are Sumerian planet lists, which we talked about in episode 1, that describe the planets as the Anunnaki passed them during a space journey to Earth. Mars, which is called Mulapin, planet where the right course is set, was so named also on an amazing circular tablet, which copied nothing less than a route map from the journey of Nibiru to Earth by Enlil, who's Enki's brother, and the more militaristic Anunnaki, graphically showing that you take a quote right turn at Mars.
Wow.
Even more enlightening as to what role Mars or the space facilities upon it had played in the journeys of the Anunnaki to Earth is the Babylonian text concerning the Akitu festival. Borrowed from ancient Sumerian traditions, it outlined the rituals and symbolic procedures during the 10 days of the New Year ceremonies. In Babylonian, the principal deity who took over the supremacy from the earlier ones was Marduk. And tie back to previous episodes, Marduk's the person who tore Tiamat apart.
Yep.
Part of the transfer of the supremacy to him was the renaming by the Babylonians of the planet of the gods from Sumerian Nibiru to Babylonian Marduk. The Akitu ceremonies, including a reenactment by Marduk of the voyages of the Annunaki from Nibiru or Marduk to Earth. Each planet passed on the way was symbolized by a way station along the course of the religious processions, and the epithet for each planet or way station expressed its role, appearance, or special features. The station or planet Mars was termed the traveler's ship, and I have taken it to mean that it was at Mars that the astronauts and cargo coming from Nibiru transferred to smaller spacecraft. In which they were transported to Earth and vice versa, coming and going between Mars and Earth, not once in 3,600 years, but on a more frequent schedule. Nearing Earth, these transporters linked up with the Earth orbiting stations manned by the Agigi. The actual landing on and takeoffs of Earth were performed by smaller shuttlecraft that glided down to the natural runways and took off by soaring upwards as they increased in power.
And that sounds to me like I believe it's in South America, possibly the Mayan temples, that some of them seem to have some sort of like a runway near them,
He
like
gets
long strips.
That's so funny you say that. I left it out, but he gets way into the Incan lines.
That's the Incan line. Sorry, Incan, not Mayan.
As the runways. Yeah, he gets way into that.
And this also, this before we go past this, it caught me the way he describes this traveling through the planets as a religious processions.
Well, remember, they taught us their science and history through religion.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So it's kind of like the stations of the cross or something, but we're doing it as like the stations of the planets.
Okay. All right. Then never mind.
Yeah. Well, what were you going to say, though?
I was going to say, like, what is their religion then? Like, what are they worshiping? But you're right to bring it back around. That was how they kind of explained scientific things to us.
Now, that's an interesting question because he never gets into that. I think it's kind of assumed that they're like us now. They're kind of like atheists. They're kind of like scientific.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's assumed that we are very close in this day and age to where the Anunnaki were then.
Well, and we don't know enough. I mean, I don't know if we're there yet. And we don't know enough really about them anyway as a species or whatever to have any idea where they're coming. We don't even know where they come from, so how could we possibly even guess at what they believe?
Well, we know where they come from. It's Nibiru.
Okay.
Yeah, but we don't know anything. We don't know much about.
We don't know anything about Nibiru.
The only things we know is that they're very similar to the ancient Babylonians. But then again, that's all mixed up in what they taught us because we're slaves. We don't really know. We know they marry their sisters.
They were definitely into some sister loving.
And so weirdly, he kind of ends the book. Actually, the final 2 chapters get deeper into this Mars stuff.
Okay.
And I found this interesting. It's the story of Phobos. So Phobos is the name of one of the Martian moons. Mars has 2 moons.
Mm-hmm.
And the bigger one is Phobos, and it's believed that both the Martian moons are actually captured asteroids. Okay. They're not like the Earth moon. They're not weird like ours. They're like normal moons. Now, in 1988, the Soviets in Russia launched 2 satellites, Phobos 1 and Phobos 2, and their goal was to go take like really high definition photos of Phobos.
Okay.
This is bizarre. He uses a lot of newspaper stuff, and this is weird, man. This could be its own episode, but Sitchen done did it for us. Now, Phobos 1 was like almost immediately lost on the journey. They said it was quote unquote communication error.
Okay.
But Phobos 1 just like went off the grid. Now, Phobos 2 made it to Mars. Okay. The purpose was to sync up with the orbit of Mars moonlit Phobos and take high quality photos. But as soon as it aligned, communication problems started to develop. The last pictures taken by Phobos 2 was a quote, inexplicable object that casts an elliptical shadow on Mars, the shape of a UFO. And according to calculations, the object would be 12.5 miles long.
Oh boy, this looks like, honestly, I mean, it's a cigar shaped looking thing. It could be so many different things. There was that thing that passed by Earth that was like space debris or possibly something
That was cigar shaped.
Yeah, it was cigar shaped. We just had a cigar shaped several UFO. I mean, they happen over South America all the time.
Oumuamua.
Yeah. Wow. And that's the only thing it got.
Okay. So
it got into orbit, it synced up, it started taking pictures, and it sees this, and then it's just gone.
It wanted to take pictures of the moon, and then it saw this elliptical object. Now, here's the thing. So apparently, I didn't know this about the 80s, but you know how like Reagan was into like working with the Russians and stuff like that. So apparently, like NASA had helped fund this, and it was like kind of a joint venture with us in Europe and Russia and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Russia was like, "Hey, we saw an inexplicable object, and it went out. The project's over with." And we're like, could you please give us more information?" So they released.
They're like, "No, comrade, we cannot."
Pretty much. So they said, and this all kind of came out in a series over a few months of newspaper articles. At first, they're like, "Hey, same thing that happened with the first satellite. We had a communication error. Sorry." The mission's off. It's over with. We can't talk to the satellite. Then slowly they admitted, okay, well, there might have been some weird things we were seeing prior to the satellite going dead. And then eventually they released these two photos, which I have here, showing the shadow of the object on Mars' surface. It's cigar saucer shape. Now, there's a last photo, though, that apparently shows the object, according to the sources from Russia, but they've never released it.
Well, that photo is kind of terrifying.
Yeah,
like, there's planet, big old black thing. I don't know what's going on there. A black hole. I don't know. It's humongous in the picture, though.
It's a 12-mile UFO.
It's easily 20% of the entire picture.
This might be like the most convincing UFO, one of the most convincing UFO photos I've ever seen, knowing that it's like officially from a space, expedition. And like the obvious thing is like, oh, maybe it was the shadow of one of the moons. And like, we have lots of photos of that. We know this is not that. We know this is not the shadow it cast.
Oh, the cigar shaped one. Okay.
Yeah. We know that this is a massive object that does not belong there. So Russia would not share the final photo, but they did, after pressure from the international community, they did show these photos of the shadows from the whatever destroyed our Phobos satellite.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Sitchen then gets into basically his belief that Phobos is essentially a jumping off base, just as in the Babylonian mythology, that it is. He gets into all the reasons why you would use a moon, and we do this as well. Like,
I mean, Elon Musk has talked about that's why he wants a moon base, so that he can. That's just a launch pad for Mars.
It's a launch pad, so
like the same theory as what's going on here, except from Mars to us.
Yep. It's Phobos because it's the bigger moon, and because it is a moon instead of Mars itself with more gravity, would be actually the perfect place if you were on this weird 3,600 year orbit. It would be the perfect place to set up a base to go to and from
Earth. And we can't take pictures of it.
No, because something will destroy your satellites.
Have we gotten I wonder. I don't know if you know. Have we taken?
I've wondered the same thing. Nah, I didn't get into it. I wanted to leave it. I wanted to leave it here.
That's fair.
Yeah,
this sounds like it could almost be its own thing.
It's yeah. And in fact, I very much shortened it down because I was starting to get upset at this point that we weren't talking about Genesis. But yeah, this Phobos thing is very weird. It might be its own episode at some point. So then he went into a very long, like the last part of the book, he talks about like our weaponization of space. He like theorizes that's us protecting ourselves from the Nibiru people.
Hmm.
And I left that out because it's quite frankly, most of this book is timeless, but that part's pretty dated because we've already gone over Space Force stuff.
Mhm.
He's talking about like Bush era and Reagan era space stuff. It's like we can cover that in a different episode. Um, its final chapter is called Secret Anticipation, which basically, I mean, the whole Nibiru thing is that if it's on this 3,600-year orbit, and if the last time they left us was the Great Flood, then we're quickly approaching
We
when
about do.
we're about due. And Nibiru is coming back. And so he kind of believes that the reason we're trying to weaponize space is to prepare for
To attack the planet that's coming for us.
or to protect ourselves, I guess.
Yeah.
It's coming back. So boy, oh boy, oh boy. And that my friend is Zacharia Sitchen's Genesis revisited, all three parts.
Man, that was good. That was put a lot of legwork in there, Dennis. I like how it came together.
Thank you. I'll probably, if you're cool with it, I'll probably do some editing and release this as a one thing on our
I
channel
don't care.
as like a combined chapters, where we don't repeat the same stuff, and you can just listen to like maybe I'll cut it down to like 2 hours so you can go through the whole book.
I never arguing with you doing some editing, Dennis. Never.
Yeah, I know.
You edit your heart away.
For those who don't know, Patrick pulls all of the behind the scene weight of this show. So please post mean things about him, I guess.
No.
Well, I hope you enjoy learning that you're half Neanderthal, half alien, and that this is all secretly spelled out in the Bible. I hope that really, and also
Sleep
there's
well tonight. Get your binomial, how do I say it?
binaural.
Binaural beats on. And let's go explore the universe tonight, you guys.
Let's go meet some Anunnaki and Nibiru. Like and subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. We're putting in work for you when we're doing 3-parter episodes like this. And
You
gosh,
read a big book and wrote a bunch of notes on it, Dennis. Good job.
yeah. Congrats. I've summarized the book. Hey, are you your episodes next week?
Mm-hmm.
Do you, just out of curiosity, you plan on doing a bonus this time like you did a couple weeks ago?
I don't know. You never know when the bonus is coming with me.
You never know. All right, I like that. I like your mysteriousness.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We love you. This has been a great couple months, man. We're starting 2021 off strong.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're doing a better job if you listen to the show for the last year. We're getting better and better. Share this with friends, man. You no longer have to be ashamed of us. Let's make this a mutual thing. We're not ashamed of you. So
I've already told my mom about you guys.
Share. I know. I'm bragging about you to my parents. Share this with friends. Share this with the family, man. Let's get this really going, man, because we're going to remain engaged with you. And we are loving what's going on with cryptic accounts. So unless you have anything else to add, Patrick, I think I'm done.
Nope. That's good.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.